Hi and welcome. Everyone heard the word royalty before the champagne. Flute touched the marble bar. The rooftop wind whoa through the fire pits, through the women in silk and the men in sharp navy. Then draped it over Riley like a sash. Connor lifted his glass higher to my queen, he called, smiling. The practiced smile that had won him term sheets and juries alike. People turned. Phones hovered, and then, as the words settled, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open onto the skyline of Chicago, and Maya stepped out in a black dress that fit like a sentence on her arm. Aryan barrier. Billionaire. The room forgot to breathe. The rooftop of the Peregrine Hotel in the West Loop glittered on a late September night. A blanket of city light stitched with the river's quick curve. Connor Hale stood beneath a heat lamp, tall and photogenic in a charcoal blazer that matched the everyman color of his ambition. To my queen, he said again, lower this time, and tapped his flute against Riley's. To us. Riley Voss smiled. She had cut her hair in a sharp bob that afternoon, telling the stylist in Ravenswood she wanted to look like a woman who already had what she wanted. To you, she said. But the skyscraper reflection in her glass showed her face first, and then his. It was supposed to be the beginning, a soft launch of the relationship, a way to introduce her as more than a whisper in a corridor. Connor thrived on controlled reveals. He'd once won a case by unveiling a single receipt during closing arguments, placing it on the witness stand like proof of a miracle. Tonight was another kind of closing. The elevator doors opened with a clean bell. Heads turned as they do when something more expensive than themselves enters a room. Maya Serrano stepped out. People always underestimated how small Maya was. At first. She had a compact presence the way some cities do. A density not obvious until you stand inside them and realize a H100 stories stack above your. Head. The black dress was simple, sleeves grazing her elbows. Beside her was Aryan Bahia, whose presence worked the opposite way. Tall, spare. A man whose quietness made more noise than most laughter. The man who had turned freight software into a constellation of ports, warehouses and algorithms that moved the world. Is that? Someone whispered. Yes, someone else answered, already tapping a screen. That's him, Maya felt the hum before she saw Connor. Wind pressed her hair against her cheek and then let it go. She wasn't ready. She had come for a fundraiser downstairs, Urban Gardens for underserved neighborhoods, and agreed, reluctantly, to accompany Armor up for a drink afterward because he had promised 15 minutes. Then I'll return you to your world. You're in my world, she'd said, and he'd smiled, apologetic and mildly amused, as billionaires often are when told they occupy the space everyone else lives in. Armor's hand was light at her back. A suggestion rather than a claim. If it's too much, it won't be, she said, lying for both of them. Royalty, Connor was saying, and then he saw her. The word fell from his mouth and rolled to a stop at Ma's feet. It wasn't the first time she had walked into a room and found herself in a different story than the one she'd been told. The first time had been their kitchen, a year ago, when the text on Connor's phone lit up with the kind of intimacy that leaks blue white from private screens. Now across the rooftop, Rayleigh's spine tried not to stiffen. She knew Maya's name. Everyone did. By how carefully. Connor never said it. The ex. The woman with the soft laugh. A city planner who understood budgets better than he did. The one with the dog named Rufus, who had always recognized Connor at a block away. Riley had met people like Mayall before. Women who had been convinced out of their brilliance by men who bowed to their own reflection. But seeing Armor beside her rearranged the furniture of Riley's beliefs. Connor's eyes flicked from Meyer to Armor, and whatever script he had rehearsed blew off the roof and into the river. My, he said, the syllables heavy with memory. You look like myself, she said. And the wind made a micro gesture of respect. Around her ankles. Arian offered his hand to Connor with a slight nod. Arian, he said. We've not met. We were at a panel together last year, Connor replied too. Quickly. Tech and equity at the Merchandise Mart. You spoke after me, Arian's mouth made a shape between politeness and recollection. Ah. He turned to Maya. Then back to Connor. Good to see you again. Riley stepped forward, the bob framing her face like a strong decision. I'm Riley, she said, and extended a manicured hand. I sell spaces where people get to live the lives they imagine. It was how she always introduced herself when the cameras weren't rolling. She made sure to look at Maya when she said it. Something in Mia warmed, not friendliness, not yet a recognition of someone else on a high wire. Maya, she said, I build spaces where the city remembers people who can't imagine it yet. Riley blinked. No one spoke like that around Connor. Congratulations. Maya added, gesturing lightly. The glass, the glow, the photographed smiles on your news. It should have been a revenge tableau. The ex-wife walking in with a billionaire minutes after the ex-husband dubbed his mistress royalty. But the room, attentive and over-scented, made everything more ridiculous than operatic. Armor touched his watch. 15 minutes. He said quietly to Mia. These things rarely take that long, she said, her chest hollowing. In careful arithmetic. She had rehearsed running into Connor. She hadn't rehearsed the word royalty or the way it scraped her teeth. You look like you've slept, Connor said finally. Because in his world wellness was the currency that replaced love after it failed. I do, she said. She did not tell him about the night she had slept on the sofa because the bed knew his shape too well. Another round. Someone asked the air. An eager intern. Maybe the sky had a bruised purple line to the west. No, Maya said. No, thank you. She and Connor stood unnatural yardage apart. The kind of distance no tape measure could hold. Riley felt the way a story doesn't end so much as it changes the room it's told in. Arian looked at the river, and then at Meat. Then at Connor again. He seemed to notice how Connor's hands, usually conducting the silent orchestra of power, hung at his sides like they were waiting for permission. Good night, Mia said at last. We have to be downstairs. To the gardens, Armour added. And his voice carried the simple weight of an intention already funded. Riley held her breath as if exhaling would topple her crown. Connor's jaw clicked into resolve. Enjoy, he said. We have other plans. Royal plans, someone murmured behind him. And the word made Riley colder than the wind. Maya. And Arian stepped back into the elevator. Maya's hand hovered above the buttons as if there were a floor marked. Before, there wasn't. She pressed 18 for the ballroom and watched the doors glide shut on a skyline vast enough to hold every kind of mistake. Long before a rooftop, with heat lamps and unblinking phones. There was a kitchen south of Harrison where the cabinets had been open shelves because they couldn't afford doors yet. It was the way Maya liked it. Every item visible so you had to live honestly. She had painted the shelves the particular green of a park bench. And Connor had rolled his eyes and then spent a Saturday sanding them, anyway. He'd been different then, less practiced, more porous. A public defender who wore the world's disasters home on his shoulders, tossing them onto a chair every night. Like damp laundry. Maya had her own baggage. A degree in urban planning and a series of small heartbreaks that came from watching people outbid by numbers on a screen. In those years they believed the city could be coaxed into fairness like a shy animal. They met in the line at Cafecito on Congress arguing about the right way to fix bike lanes. You can't just paint virtue on asphalt, she'd said. You have to change the way the street thinks. He had fallen for that sentence and realized much later that he had married a woman Who could out-argue him with metaphors alone? In time, the world rewarded Connor's talent with more than applause. He moved from defender to a litigation boutique with clients whose problems were expensive enough to fix. It's temporary, he told Mia when she looked at the invoice. Figures handed to him like forbidden candy. A few years, and I'll go back to work. That matters. She nodded. She wanted to believe him because he was the person she had chosen. Because the city was so stubbornly itself, and because love, like transit, requires faith in schedules you cannot see. The first real sign of trouble was not a woman. It was Connor's calendar, court dates, investor brunches with potential firm partners, dinners where he learned to say the right names in the right order. He became a man who booked lunches with friends. 3 weeks out, he shaved in the car. He returned home grafted to his phone. Maya learned to eat on the my sofa with the television off, the room so quiet she could hear the dog's dreams. Hey, she would say when he came in, at 10 o'clock at midnight. At 2 o'clock, hey, he'd say back. And they'd kiss like people passing the same cup of coffee across a long table. She suggested counseling the way. She suggested adding a bus line with maps, timing and grace. Connor agreed because he loved her. Because he was not stupid. Because the word divorce was a cold room he had only entered as a guest. The datings office in Printer's Row had a couch that felt like it had listened to 1,000 confessions and refused to judge any of them. Doctor talked about attachment, about stories we tell keeping safe. Connor talked about scarcity, about how his father's layoffs had been a retroactive prophecy. Every good thing temporary. Maya talked about planning for parks and people and how you cannot set a playground where the ground was poisoned and pretend the swings would make it safe. Those sessions made them kinder but didn't make them closer. It's a kind of tragedy when therapy teaches you to hand someone their pain beautifully, wrapped in words, and still your fingers don't brush. Then came the second sign. A text of admiration that Connor didn't delete because he had not learned paranoia. Only ambition. Riley appeared as a name on a screen long before she became hips in perfume and a laugh that sounded like someone else's victory. Loved your talk at 1871, she'd written. You make risk sound like a language anybody can learn. He replied with a modest joke and then didn't tell Maya. Not because it was a secret, but because it was nothing, and men are particularly bad at measuring nothings as they turn into something you can't lift. They met in person at a ribbon cutting for a River North Tower where the lobby smelled like citrus and new money. Riley was showing a unit to a filmmaker and a doctor, speaking with the kind of polished casualness that comes from an expensive childhood. Or its exact opposite. Connor tried to dislike her, and failed the way you fail to dislike a song that hits the beat of your chest. Maya met Riley too, at a different party month later, and didn't register anything more than a well-dressed woman with a laser pointer for attention. Nice to meet you, Riley had said, never learning that when Maya replies you too, she usually means it. By then, the third sign was the one too big to be a sign. Connor's own sense of self-expanding, like a skyline visible from the expressway. Opportunity makes some people generous. It made Connor sharper, as if he might cut his way into a future where nothing could slip out of his hands. He told Mia he was tired of losing to people with worse arguments and better Rolodexes. He didn't tell her he had started to like the weight of admiration. The way heads turned when he entered rooms he had once only cleaned after hours. As a student at home. The dog developed a limp. They carried him up the stairs. We're okay, Maya told Rufus, and didn't notice she was talking to herself. The night everything changed. The rain came sideways off the river. Connor left his phone on the counter while he showered water, striking tile like applause. A text blinked into the kitchen. Rufus, half asleep on the rug. Did not look up. Maya reached for the phone to check the time, and saw the word royalty. It was lodged within a sentence. Stop by after the gala. I have a surprise for you. Royalty. And it took a second for her brain to process that. Connor had written it to someone else. The word didn't even make cheese under her tongue. It made dust. When he came out, she was sitting on the floor back against the cabinet, the phone in her hand, like she'd found it washed up on a beach. Who is she? Maya asked, the calm in her voice. The kind that comes before a bridge falls. He lied, not a lot. Just enough to buy himself a version of the next 5 minutes. He could live inside a client. He said a joke. He reached for the phone. She did not give it to him. Rufus thumped his tail. And the city outside pretended not to listen. By morning, they had entered the thing you can't walk back out of without leaving something you need behind. In the months that followed, lawyers who had once traded jokes with Connor across courtrooms now summoned civility with him in conference rooms where the air conditioning never relaxed. Ma signed where she was told to sign. She kept the planning job in the apartment because she had chosen it, and because the dog couldn't learn anew route at his age. She did not ever, not once, call Riley by her name. If you had asked Riley Vos how greed looks, she would have said it looks like her father's sink. Always a dish in it. Always a bill wedged on the windows. Never enough. She left home young, not because home was cruel, but because it was impatient with hope. She learned to make hope her currency. Real estate had been an accident. An open house in Brownsville where she poured wine and told a young couple they looked like they belonged there. The broker noticed. You should do this, he'd said. Which is how women fall into the lives that seem to fit. They're told to try them on. She passed the exam, learned the vocabulary of view lines and contingencies, gleaned the taste of money like a supplier, and made herself charming. The way you make a bed beautiful while knowing you have to sleep in it. When she met Connor at that River North opening, the first thing she saw was not his face, but the way people made way for him. That kind of space is intoxicating if you've spent your life squeezed between other people's elbows. He was handsome in the clean cut. Wave at photographs with the city behind it. He was generous in conversation, fond of questions that made you feel like the subject of a profile. Furthermore, he asked about her childhood and didn't flinch when she told him what it was. Furthermore, he didn't tell her about Maya right away. Furthermore, he mentioned a divorce fast. Like tearing tape, she waited for details. He gave her a summary instead. We were different. He said, we wanted different futures. She nodded. She knew what it meant to translate pain into an elevator pitch. Night he called her royalty. He had sent a car. She had stood at her mirror and practiced the look of a woman who receives a compliment without batting it away. Her phone buzzed with comments from her last listing video. Someone had called her a goddess, someone else a gold digger, and someone had asked where she bought the blouse. She pinned her hair back and left the comments to argue among themselves. At the rooftop he watched her the way men watch sunsets over the kind of water they do not swim in. Beautiful, distant theirs by right of observation. She knew being adored is not the same as being loved. But sometimes the math pencils out anyway. Royalty, he said, and she laughed because she didn't know what else to do with a word like that. She and Connor were both people who had learned to perform a version of themselves that got them invited back. They understood the contract. He'd give her legitimacy in rooms she'd only sold from the outside. She'd give him youth and proof his life after goodness could still feel good. But then Maya came in with the Billionaire and the script they'd collaborated on as if at a secret writer's room folded in half. The speed with which the room calibrated itself was dizzying. Even the bartender reached for top-shelf liquor by instinct, Riley watched the way Armour looked at Meyer. An absence of spectacle in a man whose entire existence was spectacle. It wasn't possession. It wasn't threat. It was respect. Which is the one thing she had never been given by any man with a credit limit that matched his ego. Connor, to his credit or to his mistake, didn't stop to evaluate. He did not try to reclaim the room. He stood very still and recalculated. Later, when they were in the corner, farther from the heat lamp, he said, "It's fine." His voice carried the confidence of a man who believes that what he owns cannot be taken. "This changes nothing." "Of course," Riley said, and made her mouth into the shape of agreement. But a small voice inside her, one that sounded like the girl who tallied leftover coins in a tower of cups by the sink, whispered back, "Everything. People think the other woman is a villain. Sometimes she is. Sometimes she is a person who loved, or pretended to, because the alternative was returning to a life where the rent whispers through the ceiling at night that you are 1 month from falling." After the rooftop, she walked home along the river, heels in her hand, the Hyatt's lights skipping across the surface like promises not yet broken. She passed a family, the kind that did not look wealthy but looked alloyed by something stronger, the father's hand on the mother's back. The kids allowed to walk 1 step ahead because the parents were confident they'd come back when called. Rayleigh turned her head. She didn't want to know what it might have felt like to say yes to a life without a skyline. Connor texted, "You were incredible." She typed and deleted and typed again. "We were," she sent. Then blocked the tendril of thought that had begun to ask, "What am I in this story? A plot device, a mirror?" When she reached her apartment, she opened the window to trade lake breeze for air conditioning. Noise. The wind made her curtains into sails somewhere. A siren grieved. Then stopped. She put her phone on the counter with the expensive knives she had bought on sale. She took off the bobbed wig no one had noticed and stared at her natural coils in the mirror, soft as a confession. The wig had been a choice. The illusion of control. She did not sleep. When dawn came, it came with the assurance that choices are chapters, not sentences. She just hadn't decided which chapter she was in. People said Arian Baisha preferred warehouses to weddings. He'd grown up above a convenience store in Ski, the place that smelled like cardamom and ink and the thin coins of sweets he sucked when his mother wasn't looking. He'd learned early that money is less about numbers than rhythm. Does it arrive in time with the bills? His father kept ledgers with a meticulously sharpened pencil and a little smile that meant the deli meat had been a good price. Armour thought he might become a civil engineer like the ones on TV who wore hard hats and pointed at graphs. Instead, he wrote code until the bit flipped from hobby to hunger. He built a platform that matched empty trucks to merchants like it was pairing soulmates. Then matched the platform to investors with the same skills. His gift was not vision. It was patience. Where others chased press, he chased permission from the math. He dated. He tried. He even fell in love once with a violinist who taught him how to listen to an argument like a symphony. She left when she realized he treated love like process. Improvement. He met Maya in daylight. It mattered to him. He was touring neighborhood projects the way donors do, arriving to see outcomes they had already paid for when outcomes were still promises. Maya was in a white hard hat and a faded Wilson Community Coalition tee, pointing at a map and saying, "No, not there." The bus stop tells a different story. He liked the way she argued, with consequence and humility tangled together. She did not flatter. She did not bend. When someone said Mr. Bahia, she did not look at him. Afterward he introduced himself. "I'm Armour," he said. "I know," she replied, but not like a fan might know. She knew the number of his dollars, not the sharpness of his jawline. He asked if she had time for coffee, and she informed him warmly, with humor. That time was the one grant she'd never received. He liked that too. Furthermore, he asked again weeks later, in a way that suggested he wanted not to buy but to borrow a piece of her attention. They met at a cafe on Milwaukee that served cinnamon donuts like small halos over 2 cups of coffee. They built a scaffolding of conversation sturdy enough to hold weight. She told him about the divorce without telling him about royalty. He told her about the violinist and the convenience store. You know you're a story to people, she said, not unkindly. A short one. They say your name and the room becomes a different weather. I try not to read my weather reports. He said they don't make me kinder. He did not call her a queen. He did not try to rescue her. He offered introductions, money, and finally, when she had accepted neither himself, I would like to spend time in your city, he said once. And she understood he meant with her, at the rooftop. He did what he always does in rooms that watch him. He turned himself down. He let Ma steer. He nodded when introduced. Furthermore, he calculated how long 15 minutes could feel if every pair of eyes was a question. Furthermore, he recognized Connor by type, if not by face. The man who survives by believing winning is moral. When the elevator doors closed after that first encounter, he studied the panel and said, "Are you okay?" "Ask me again in an hour," she replied, exhaling like someone blowing dust off a book. Of course he kept his voice. Even he had learned, over years of size making and bending, that the richest gift sometimes is to make a space smaller so the person you care about can breathe inside it. Downstairs, beneath chandeliers designed to look like bubbles, forever escaping champagne, Maya turned her attention to people who spoke the language she loved. Square footage of gardens, cost per raised bed. The microclimate near the viaduct. Arian did what wealthy men do when they truly care about something. He listened until the numbers spoke and his check matched their pitch. "Are you sure?" Maya asked. When he wrote a number that would build not a garden, but a network of gardens, a future that could replicate itself. "I'm buying," he said. "Time for kids so they can argue with their parents over tomatoes instead of rent." She smiled. "The kind that is almost private." "Then thank you," he shrugged. "And I like tomatoes." On the way out, he watched her take calls from volunteers, from an older aide whose timetable was a fiction, from a girl named Annalisa who didn't know how to convince her landlord to let her put a planter by the back stairs. "I'll call him," Maya said. She would. She always did. In the car driving back toward Wilson. Along the river, the skyline reflecting itself until the water seemed to be a city. "Dreaming of being a city," Armour said. "I don't want to be a headline in your life." "You already are," she said. And when he started to apologize, she added, "But not the only one." He nodded, relief passing across his face like a low cloud. "I like how you make sentences," he said. "I like how you make silence," she replied. Outside, a boat passed its lights like an unpunctuated sentence. When he dropped her off, he didn't lean in. He got out, walked around, opened her door, and stood with her on the sidewalk like two people don't have to be anything more than two people. The next morning he sent her a picture of his breakfast: tomato sliced on a plate. Salt like snow, no caption. She replied with a picture of Rufus's paw on her foot, no caption. It was the cleanest message either of them had gotten in years. News travels in cities like smell through vents along alleys behind the walls. Maya Serrano, seen with Arian Bart, a gossip column blog, hissed without venom, attaching a photograph so grainy it might as well have been of two strangers. Connor Hale debuts romance with realtor Riley Vos. It continued names correctly spelled, commas in the right places. Heart emojis scattered like confetti by a tired intern. Maya went to work, which is to say she went where the maps were. Her desk had a plant, whose leaves obeyed light in a way People do not ignore it, her colleague Tanya said. Mean the internet or don't. But either way. We have a meeting with Streets and Sand at 11 o'clock. Let it be an asterisk. Maya said she wanted her life to be footnotes to things that mattered more. At noon, her phone lit up with a name. She had set to do not answer Connor. She stared at it. Rufus. In his bed under her desk, lifted an eyebrow. She answered. Can we talk? He asked. His voice was the voice you use when you are trying to sound like a person instead of a headline. We are. She said, not to be cruel, but to be precise in person. She looked at the calendar, which was a small city itself. Fine, she said. Half an hour. The cafe at Blue Island. 3 o'clock. He arrived early. He'd always been early. A man who preferred to wait than to be waited on. Mare arrived on time and stood until he stood, and neither of them, in an old choreography, reached for the other. They ordered chai and said nothing until the steam quieted. You looked happy, he said. Finally, I looked accompanied, she replied. Which is not the same. He flinched. I'm sorry about the rooftop, I didn't. You didn't plan that. She said. No. He traced the rim of his cup. I said something stupid. You said something perfectly on brand. She said, because she had lost the taste for ease. He laughed once. A strange dry sound. Maya. He stopped, as if his mouth had reached a caution sign. I miss you. She swallowed. Once that sentence had been the rope she climbed out of every bad day. Now it was a reminder that even ropes fray. You miss a version of me that smiled while you became someone else. She said. He winced. I became what I thought I had to become. She was quiet. I don't think you believe that anymore, she said. Maybe not. He looked up. Do you love him? I don't know him well enough to love him, Maya said. But I know myself well enough not to perform for him. Connor shut his eyes. A brief involuntary prayer. Riley isn't you, he said. A wrong sentence. A clumsy cross to bear. I hope not, Maya said, for her sake. He nodded. He had come wanting to apologize and to be forgiven. At the same time, he realized, sipping the too sweet chai, that apologies are not tickets. They do not guarantee admission to the future. Called her royalty like a man who had never met a queen, he said, surprising himself. Maya did not smile. The truth had no flavor. She could name. Then meet one next time, she said. Start with yourself. When she left, he stayed. He sat with the empty cup and tried to remember the name of the park bench. Green. She had painted the shelves all those years ago. He couldn't. He felt poorer than he had ever been when he had been actually poor. Riley, meanwhile, had her own meeting with herself in her bathroom mirror. What do you want? She asked out loud, because sometimes saying it invites the answer to arrive. Do you want a crown that falls off in the wind? The wig lay quiet in the sink. She opened a notebook and wrote, stability, respect, choice. She did not write Connor, because if he belonged on that list, he would have been one of those words. Her phone rang. Dinner at Abbey, Connor asked, trying for buoyant. Come over, she said. Instead, no cameras. No toasts. He came. They ate on the floor because the table still hadn't arrived. He started to talk about the rooftop, and she stopped in with a gentle palm. Tell me one true thing, she said. He thought, I don't know how to be admired without needing more of it, he said. She blinked. Honesty makes even beautiful rooms appear suddenly smaller. Okay, she said, then start wanting different things. She did not tell him she had already begun. Eamon texted Maya. Board pushed dinner. She considered committee at 7. Late ramen. She replied, perfect, he sent. I'll bring tomatoes. She laughed. The laugh Rufus recognized. None of them knew that redemption, when it came, would arrive not as a scene, but as maintenance. Daily choices, small repairs. The turning of valves. Cities don't transform by floodlight, but by crews working while everyone else sleeps. Love 2. In the months that followed, the city layered itself over their story. as cities do when they are kind. The rooftop faded into rumor. The blog posts scrolled into the past. But consequences of rail schedules run on tracks you can't always see. Connor's practice expanded. With expansion came the kind of client who wants their money to be a moral argument. He found himself defending a development plan that would revitalize a South Side block by relocating the people who lived there to nowhere. In particular, in a meeting he said community benefits, as if the words could transform a bulldozer into a grant. After he sat in his office, the skyline framed by his window like a reward, he remembered Mia's voice in a small kitchen saying, "You can't set a playground where the ground is poisoned." He closed his eyes. The ground under his success tasted like copper. He called Riley. "Want to see a house?" she asked, voice buoyant out of habit. "Tell me you're selling to a teacher," he said. She laughed. "A teacher and a nurse. Tinley Park, and I'm thinking of applying to deal part-time urban studies." He smiled. An involuntary softening. "Since when?" "Since I realized I want a vocabulary that doesn't come from floor plans." She said. "She didn't say since I watched another woman draw a map by hand while the room waited for a check." Done. "Do it," he said. "I'll help." "I'm not asking for help," she replied gently. "I'm telling you because I want it to be true." Out loud. Armor and Mare worked quietly. The garden network became a reality. Raised beds near viaducts, pollinator strips along alleys, workshops beneath murals. Maya navigated aldermen like canals. Armor watched budgets multiply and found joy in the number of children who now knew what basil smelled like. He did interview only when they were about the gardens. He declined anything else which made him more interesting, which he disliked. One evening, watching a group of teenagers haul compost with the seriousness of a heist, a man said, "You were right about the bus stop." Maya grinned. "Everyone thinks the stop is just where the bus is. They forget it's also where people wait." He looked at her. "I was one of those people waiting, thinking a bus was the point," he said, "not the people it carried." Later that week, Connor FaceTimed Maya. He stared at his own face on the screen for 3 seconds before flipping the camera. "I'm about to turn down a client." He said, "It will cost a lot of money." "It will cost me." "Okay." She said. She waited. "I just wanted someone to hear it who knew me before I do." She said. "I did." He took a breath. "Thank you," he said, and hung up before he could ask for her blessing like a favor. He met with his partners. He made his case. He said, "We cannot call extracting value a virtue. Furthermore," he lost the vote. "Furthermore," he resigned. "Furthermore," he felt something inside him unclench, the way a muscle returns to kindness after a long run. Riley met him afterward. "I'm proud of you," she said, and meant it. She had been studying maps at night, tracing lines that once divided and imagining lines that might connect. She brought him coffee in a reusable cup like a small manifesto. "I don't know what I am now," he said raw. "Hungry," she said, and not for attention. She slid across the table a pamphlet for a legal aid clinic. "They need volunteers." He looked at her as if seeing something new and elemental. "You're changing," he said. "I'm choosing," she corrected. Arian and Maya had their own edges too. Sand, he had invited her to speak at his foundation gala. She had said no. "I don't want to stand under chandeliers," she said. "I want to stand on dirt." He accepted it, but stumbled. His board suggested optics. He bristled. They fought gently, carefully, like people who know the value of silence. He said, "I want to show you," she said. "I want to do the work." They both apologized. They both meant it. Rufus died in early spring in his sleep like a closing door. They buried him near a community garden that Mia had argued into existence. Connor came. He carried the box. He cried, and Didn't perform it. Riley stood beside him. One hand on Mia's shoulder, then on his. Arian said nothing and built a bench. Painted the green of a park that remembers grief. On it a small plaque. Rufus, who knew all the roots that day. Something unstuck among the four of them. Grief has a way of making people choose better. The city's first heat wave arrived with the scent of asphalt sighing in Little Village. A boy carried cilantro home like a bouquet in Greenville. A woman stared out from her tower at a river that would never speak back in Wilson. Maya and Armour argued over whether the Fiesta del Sol route should include a garden walk. People won't veer off the main path. Maya said, unless you make it feel like a path worth veering for. Armour replied, they were both right. Which is the hardest kind of disagreement to resolve. Connor began his new job at the clinic. His suit still too precise for the waiting room. He learned to sit differently, to listen until the other person's silence ended. Before his questions did, he watched. A mother explained to a judge why a lease written in English she couldn't read held her life inside it like a fist. Furthermore, he looked at his hands and saw them open. Riley loved Deal. Loved the older students who returned to classrooms like swimmers, who had found the shore. She wrote a paper on soft power and community design and, for the first time in years, felt wanted by a field that didn't require heels. She and Connor became gentler. They were tender. Not because they were certain, but because they weren't on Lakeshore Drive. He reached for her knee at a red light, and she rested her hand on his. One night in July, Maya knocked on Connor's door. He looked surprised in a way. That said, he had imagined this moment 1,000 times and always mislabeled it in his mind. She handed him a folder. These are the plans for the most recent development, she said. Your old firm is representing the developer. There. Citing community benefit. They mean a small dog park. There are no dogs on that block. He smiled. Despite the anger, Rufus would have liked the idea. Rufus liked everything, she said. And they both stilled a small comet of sorrow passing cleanly between them. Help me write the letter, he said. The kind that changes a judge's mind. They collaborated at his dining table. It felt almost like making dinner, like the life they had once imagined, but never fully cooked. They argued over clauses. They revised. They ordered tacos and ate over the sink. We were always good at this part, he said. Meaning work, she nodded. The most dangerous thing about compatibility is that it can make you believe it's love. At midnight, she stood. I'm not staying, she said. Because she understood now that clarity is kindness. I know, he said and didn't add yet, which made him noble for a breath. Thank you. Maya. She left with the city singing its late-night song of sirens and bikes and people arguing about nothing and everything on stoops. She texted Armour still awake. He sent back a picture. His open laptop. A bowl of cherries. A news article about the gardens being adopted by 2 more schools. Always. He wrote. She sent a cherry emoji. And he replied with a tomato. Riley, meanwhile, had begun drafting a proposal funded not by Armour but by a small grant. A program to teach first-time buyers in working-class neighborhoods how to read. Contracts. She asked Mia for feedback. Mia wrote in the margins, as if the page carried a future. You don't need me, she said when they met to discuss it. You just need a pilot. I need you, Riley insisted. Then caught herself. I need the way you think, Maya. Not a. You can borrow it, she said. Just bring it back better. They smiled. 2 women on a bench. Painted green. Both pretending not to notice the billionaire on the other side of the garden, hauling bags of mulch. Like anyone else. Connor arrived late, tie gone, sleeves up, and sat in the dirt to show a kid named Junior how to wiggle compost. Rich enough to smell like wealth. From a distance, the scene looked like equity. Up close, it looked like people choosing each other's company. The gala came back around. Because such things always do. The foundation insisted on an update. The board wanted donors to see outcomes. This time Maya agreed to attend. With conditions: a panel with the school principals, a short video featuring gardeners' testimonies, a silent auction that included labor as well as art. Were raffling hours. She told Arian, mine, yours, the coordinators. People should pay for time. I like it. He said time is the only real currency anyway. The event was on a rooftop again, but not that rooftop. A smaller one where the river felt like an ally rather than a witness. Connor came with Riley. He had a new job title. He didn't lead with staff attorney. She had a new word on her resume. He was proud to say out loud. Student Maya stood at the side, arms folded, listening to a teenager explain how Kale had taught her to wait. Armor stood behind her, not saying anything, which is its own art speech. Someone called. As people call when they need a shape for their night. Maya looked at Armor. He shook his head. She smiled. She stepped forward. I'm not giving a speech. She said into the mic, I'm telling a story. A short one. The roof quieted the way roofs do when they're given. Something better than skyline. A year ago, she said, I thought love was a building you could buy. Then I thought it was a building you could condemn. Turns out love is nearer to zoning, messy, negotiated, dependent on how the neighbors feel and how much sun something needs. We planted gardens because we wanted to learn patience. We found people instead. Laughter, a softening. Riley felt her eyes smart, which surprised her. Connor, who had been averse to crying in public, let the sting happen. Mia continued. The word royalty gets used a lot about women, queen, goddess, princess, when what we actually need is to be seen as citizens. Citizens have rights and responsibilities. So thank you, she gestured, for your responsibilities. Your money, yes, but your time too. Applause. Not the thunder of self-congratulation, but the weather of agreement. After, beneath strings of lights that made the night look editable, Connor approached Mia. That was good, he said. Too plain a word, but honest. Good is great, she said. Smiling. I'm sorry, he added, the final form of a sentence. A year in the making, for who I became, for who I asked you to be. She looked at him for a long, kind second. Thank you, she said, for changing. Even if I wasn't the reason. Riley stepped in. Hey, she said to Maya. Then turned to Connor. Tell her. He took a breath. I start at the public defender's office again next month. Took a pay cut. Took a pride cut. He laughed softly. Feels like a raise. Maya's face opened. You'll be good at it. She said. I used to be, he replied. Now I hope to be. Riley squeezed his hand, and then let it go, making space. She turned to Maya. Our pilot launches in October. We got the grant. You did. Mia said. I only wrote in the margins. You wrote the margins like they were the page, Riley said, and both women knew this was what respect sounds like when it learns to speak. Arian watched from a step away, waiting, patient. The way mountains are patient. When Maya finished talking, he slid a glass of water into her hand. Speechy tea story, she corrected and sipped. I don't do speeches, he inclined his head. Then story, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny envelope. No diamonds, he said. Don't panic. She opened it. Inside was a key, extravagantly normal. The kind you get cut at a hardware store that smells like solvent and old wood. A tag read, Tool Library, 18th Street. I rented the space. He said. You make it. I'll pay for what you need. People borrow tools instead of buying them. Add a little workshop. Teach the city to fix itself. She stared, then laughed big, free, unafraid. You're ridiculous, she said. Frequently, he admitted, but I'm learning. She hugged him. Not because he was a billionaire, because he was a man who had listened. The room sighed, like something let go of its own weight. Below the river kept running rectangles of light tumbling across it like dice. The city was not healed. It was not redeemed, but it was better at repair. Across the roof, a woman posted a photo with a caption about royalty. She used the word with humor, now knowing it had lost its power. The comments filled with tomatoes and cherry emojis from people who didn't understand and people did. And when the night ended, it ended not with fireworks, but with staff folding chairs, with someone stacking plates, with Armor and Connor carrying a planter downstairs together, while Riley and Ma walked ahead arguing softly about whether pepper plants belong near the basil. No one crowned anyone. No one asked to be. They just went home, which is how most empires end and better things begin. If you felt the sharp edge of that rooftop, the cold weight of a single careless word, and the slow warmth of repair, then you already know our stories aren't made by the rooms that watch us, but by the choices we make. Once the phones are put away, Connor learned that power feels different when it's used to hold a door instead of a crown. Riley learned that respect is a language you teach yourself to speak. Arian learned that love can't be optimized, only tended. And Maya remembered that citizenship beats royalty, that gardens outlast galas, and that redemption is just maintenance with better lighting. If this story moved you, helped you breathe through your own chapters, or gave you someone to root for, do me a favor, like this video so more people find it. Shared it with a friend who might need it, and subscribe for more true-to-life fiction that heals the heart without lying to.